Hey everybody, how's it going? What is going on? I hope everybody's well. This is Dan Shinder here on Drum Talk TV with our guest today, Dave Northrup, who is coming to us from Nashville. I'm in Globe, Arizona, 100 miles east of Phoenix up in the mountains. Dave, how are you?
I'm well. How are you, Dan? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. And folks, if you see me look this way, it's not because I'm ignoring Dave, it's because I'm pulling you all up on the monitor so I can see comments and stuff. But so if you're not familiar with Dave's work, wow, such a great body of work. Most recently, he's been playing with Rick Derringer, which I have a real quick story about in a moment. Boz Scaggs. Before that, I met him while he was playing with the Oakridge Boys, which was just an amazing experience of pure Americana music. It was great to see you play with them. I do a lot of session work and things, and has a new solo album, Shapes. And it's even got a great picture of Dave after he got kicked out of the back door of the studio, sitting on the steps after arguing with the saxophone player, probably.
Exactly.
But
exactly.
Before we launch into this, I want to remind people, tell us where you're watching from. I'm going to pull up the comments here. And also, a quick story about Rick Derringer. Rick Derringer was, I'm pretty sure, the first rock star I ever met. When I was 15 or 16 in like 1978, might have been early 79, he was actually going to be playing at a movie theater that they had concerts at once in a while, a walk-in theater kind of near my house. And it's funny, I couldn't go see him because I had a gig that night, but I got to meet him at, let's see how many of you are old enough to remember a record chain called Licorice Pizza, a record store called Licorice Pizza, and I met him at a signing there.
That's so cool.
Yeah, that's like my memory of Rick Derringer. And then of course the first, like every band I delve into, the first album I buy is always the live album. So I bought the Rick Derringer live prior to that, and it had that really cool picture on the back of him and the other guitar player tossing their guitars towards each other from opposite ends of the stage, and the guitars are like 30 feet in the air center stage, and they're at each end, and a very, very young Vinny Appice on drums on that album too.
Yeah, so that was an amazing band.
Yeah, so very cool to be playing such classic music, Dave.
Yeah, man, it is really a treat. He's fantastic. He still plays his butt off, and he still sings great, and he's just got amazing stories, and he's a real humble guy. You know, it's so cool to be around a guy that has experienced a wealth of music and has contributed a wealth of music that is just so down to earth and nonchalant, and it's really cool.
That's cool. I got that vibe from him when I met him. He seemed real sort of quiet, reserved, and just had a real humble vibe, like you're saying.
Yeah. You know, we did a show this past summer. I think it was in August. We opened for Steely Dan.
Oh, wow. Cool. Yeah.
And so come to find out, Rick actually played on the demos that got Walter Becker and Donald Fagen their record deal.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and then he went on to play on a lot of those big hits. You know, Donald and him were pretty tight.
Wow, I never knew that. Steely Dan is one of my go-to CDs or albums on YouTube that I pull up whenever I'm cooking. I'll blast that in the kitchen while I'm cooking. I'll have to look at a bunch of those credits. That is really cool. He must have been really young when he made those demos, right?
Yeah, I think it was definitely after. Well, obviously it was after the McCoys.
Yeah.
So they kind of knew each other from hanging around in New York, because Rick ended up in New York City. Yeah. And that's where Fagen was, I guess. But I thought that was really interesting.
That is. I bet those stories alone have got to be great about the Steely Dan days.
Oh, yeah. You know, and the other thing was, he Donald and him reconnected while we obviously did this show. It had been a long time since they had seen each other, so they had some really cool stories.
Oh, it's great that they got to reconnect before he passed.
Yeah, and I'm, of course, a huge Jeff Porcaro fan, so I've had opportunity to talk with Rick a little bit about, because he did a few tracking dates with Jeff.
Wow.
But most of what he did with Steely Dan were overdubs.
Yeah, that's cool though. That is so cool.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Wow. So I want to tell everybody my story reaction to this. You were kind enough to send me this. Thank you so much. And I had it. Yeah, I had it for a few days. Didn't have a chance to put it on, and then I had a speaking date at ASU, and I live about an hour and a half from ASU, and where we live up in the mountains, there's this beautiful canyon to drive through where there's no phone reception or anything. So I thought, perfect time to put this on. I love this, and
thank you.
You're welcome. One of the things I told you, I called you after I heard it, and I got to tell everybody, one of the most refreshing things about this, other than the music overall, and I didn't know what to expect. That's another story I'll get to, but I think the most refreshing thing about this is how freaking organically beautiful the drums sound. I mean, just the sound of the heads and the slap of the stick on the battered heads, and it just sounds so real, which is really weird considering he programmed these drums on a 1982 Linn drum machine. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Exactly.
But I didn't know what to expect, because when I got it, I intentionally did not look at the liner notes. Thank you for liner notes. It's one of the biggest things I miss about full-size albums, is just plowing through all that stuff. And there's still CDs that have that, but I love that you have the instrumentation for every piece and everything. So from our interview, folks, that we did together about 4 or 5 years ago, I remembered that, I've seen Dave with Oakridge Boys. I know he's playing with Rick Derringer. He did some time with Boz Scaggs. He's done a lot of other stuff. He's a Nashville studio guy. But I remembered from the interview, he also was into Gentle Giant and some other off-the-wall, like, progressive stuff. So I didn't know what was going to be in here. And I put it on, and it was not at all Travis Tritt you played with. For some reason, I expected country music. And when this thing fired up, I was like, wow, this is great. So for not just drummers, but all musicians, this is a great instrumental album. There's a couple tunes that just have fantastic shuffle beat. One of the things it reminded me of is that I have a lot to work on. So thanks for that. Tell us about putting this together, Dave. The compositions, getting such great musicians together. The roster and the producer. This is really top-notch stuff. How did this all come together?
Well, it's interesting that you said what you said. You didn't know what to expect, and that was one of the reasons why I thought it was kind of an important project to put out, because as a sideman, your identity is generally defined by the people that you play with.
Right.
And that's all well and good, and I feel like I've been very fortunate in my career to have worked with really talented entertainers and real great artists. Travis Tritt was a fantastic singer and songwriter and performer, and Boz Scaggs. So I've really been blessed. I've really been fortunate. But there was always a side of me that I felt that I didn't have an opportunity to pursue, musically speaking. And instrumental music has always been a love of mine, and during my early years here in Nashville, I met this guy named Shane Theriot doing session work together. Shane is the guy that produced this record, and he was the one that actually was the one that really encouraged me that I should do this. He was really I had played on his first solo CD. Shane is an amazing guitarist and artist. He's worked with Hall & Oates for several years now, and he's the band leader and the music director for Daryl's Place. Right. And he's played with the Neville Brothers. He's also played with Boz Scaggs, but he's also a fantastic artist. He's got 4 jazz CDs out, and I was fortunate enough to play on his very first one that came out in 2000. And then I played on a track on his second release. And, during that time, he said, you should probably consider doing something like this and have something to be able to sell at your clinics and also allow people to see a different side of your playing, because he and I had done so much session work together. He knew I played more than what I had an opportunity to be able to
show off.
Yeah, to branch out on. So, he was very instrumental in, no pun intended, in helping and guiding me through the process. And it took a number of years. There's definitely gaps in between when recordings took place, and it was just a matter of having the time and having the budget, to be able to, get things done.
Did you, when he brought it up to you, and did he, if it sounds like he brought it up, when he brought it up, did you have an idea of the musicality of the project, or was it like, okay, I've got a clean slate, let me figure out what I want to do? Like, how quickly did that musical part?
That's a good question. I had definitely an idea that I wanted it to. What I didn't want is I didn't want it to be another one of those really busy drumnastics kind of records. Firstly, because that's really not the kind of player I am.
What's funny?
I do like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I gotta tell you, it's funny you say that, because I was going to say this is a drummer's album, and not because of overplaying, quote unquote, or drumnastics, but because it is so tastefully done, and there are exemplary things like the shuffle that you do in those couple songs, and it's because the drums really know their place in this music. So it's interesting you say that, because that's how I have felt about it.
And that's cool, and I've had conversations with other drummers and other musicians, and I sometimes preface it by saying, hey, if you're looking for a chops record, this is probably not going to be interesting to you. To me, it was really about good songs and making the songs really feel good and have a great groove, and to sort of, I don't know, I want to say pay tribute to some of my influences, not so much that, but I had players in mind when I would approach some of these songs. Musical influences, drumming influences, and not to say that I wanted them to, not that I was trying to steal the identity of those players, but those particular players really influenced me and how I approached those songs,
Right.
And to go as far as to say, well, how would, Dave Garibaldi approach this? How would Steve Gadd approach this? Not so much literally, but I used, I think it's evident that there is some influence, some identifiable influences in some of the songs.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you're using colors or shades of their playing that influenced you.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, almost like decorating the pieces with their influence is the way I would look at it.
Yeah. And and that was what I really wanted to. That's what I really wanted to do is just make a project about groove and good songs, and have it feel really good, and have just really great sounds. Really, and I really appreciate you mentioning the organic quality to the recording, because that was very much the focus and the direction. I always love drums to sound like they sound. I don't like a lot of processing on them, and I know that there's a place for that, but in this, I wanted it to sound like you were in the room.
It's exactly what it does sound like. It sounds like you are in the room with the drums.
Because it was all live. There wasn't a lot. These things are just performances. There's a few guitar overdubs, but what you hear is what was played. It wasn't labored over. It was just, it was all about capturing good performances, and we did several takes. But it was just really a matter of just getting that magical one that just felt and sounded good, and that that performance was the obvious one, you know?
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I have to ask you, I see a bunch of snare drums. I know there's at least a couple drum sets in the room. Can we all just geek out on gear a little bit and you give us a little tour of the Wonka factory of music there?
Yeah, so this is I'm putting my finger over there. This is my my garage that's converted into my studio here. Over here, if you can see.
Oh, the green Gretsch kit I've seen in videos. Yeah.
Yeah. This one right here is a broadcaster. And then over here is another green Gretsch kit.
I love the old logo on the red one.
Yeah, for sure.
That's cool.
I've got a few CDs.
Yeah.
I'm old school.
Yeah, me too. I still love the physical product.
Me too, man. It's all about album credits. I definitely want to know where stuff was done.
Yeah. Look at all those.
So,
beautiful. Does anyone have any questions for Dave? I'm going to ask the audience. If you have any questions, please chime in. Any questions about the gear, about his album, about working with Rick Derringer, Boz Scaggs, Travis Tritt, or Oakridge Boys? Let us know. We'll fly in some questions. Beautiful gear. So here's a question. Yeah, absolutely. Here's a question I'd like to ask drummers. Do you, and I've gotten answers all over the board. This is one of the reasons I like to ask this. You know, you're busy, you tour, you record, now you got your own project, you do session work, all these things. Do you work on your drumming, or do you only play drums when you're working on a project, whether it's touring, recording, or whatever?
You know, that's a good question. I try. I wish I had more. Well, right now I've got nothing but time. But,
yeah.
You know, and I think most of us are in that boat. But I definitely make a concerted effort, especially when I'm having to go to perform drum clinics. You know, I work more on my, chops, I guess, a bit, just make sure my stamina is up to par.
Yeah.
A lot of what I do work on is preparing for gigs, you know, or working on specific tracks that I might be having to prepare for clinics, you know, that sort of.
Yeah.
You know, it was interesting when this came out. You know, I spent the last few months with, I have to drop his name, Richard Corsello, who engineered this and mixed it. Great friend of mine, and he's got an amazing resume. Sonny Rollins to working with the guys from Journey and working with a lot of the New York jazz people. Just great guy. I met him through Troy Luccketta.
Oh, okay.
Which was a great, and Troy was actually very helpful on this record as well. But we spent so much time mixing this that I wasn't doing a lot of playing. And then when the CD came out and I had some clinic dates booked, I was like, oh my gosh, I got to bust my can. I got to learn how to play this stuff. I got to relearn how to play this.
Right.
You know? So that was very interesting. I guess it goes back to be careful what you record.
Yeah.
You have to actually have to be required to perform it.
Exactly. That's funny. I've been hit over the head recently with a realization, and that is that April 2nd, I turned 57, which I can't believe, but the point of that is that, thanks, it'll be 50 years since I started playing the drums on that day. And when I hear myself say that or think that, I feel struck with the realization that I should be a lot better. And I feel like I haven't worked on my drumming that much. And my life is busy as such with Drum Talk TV and my social media marketing company that the only time I play drums is pretty much when I do my almost daily vlog live on Drum Talk TV. Maybe sometimes it's never during a week, sometimes it's 4 times a week. And then maybe twice a week I'll get an itch to just play for fun, and it's usually like sometime between 11 at night and 1 in the morning for some reason. And I was diagnosed with diabetes last July, and when I play drums, it lowers my blood sugar. So my wife is being really good about encouraging me to play every day now, which I haven't played every day in probably 4 years. So my point is that I feel like I haven't worked on my stuff enough, and I want to make time to get back to that, because I want to be better. Even though I'm not interested in getting gigs or touring anymore or doing sessions, I play just for fun and to play live for our audience and inspire others to make videos and everything. But when I hear 50 years, it's like, I should really be better.
Yeah, well, I feel the same way too. You know, I think that you know, I've been fortunate to be able to do this for such a long time for a living. So I've been spoiled in that regard, but I wish I had the time. And like I said, I just shortly a few seconds ago, I do have the time now, but I wish over the years I had been a little bit more focused on daily practice.
Yeah, me too.
Always finding time to do something.
Yeah, with a goal in mind too. Like, today I'm going to work on this, and then feel the improvement and then apply it. I haven't been able to do that for years and years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So I have a question that I'm going to ask you, and I'd like you to, many different artists and different types of artists. I'd like to know, let's say starting with Travis Tritt, what's the biggest takeaway as a musician that you took away from working with Travis?
That's interesting. With that question in mind, I have to consider my age. I got that gig when I was 32, which, now being 52, I'll be 52 next month. I was very young,
Yeah.
All things considered. I was a young man, but I was also young as a player, and, I guess sometimes we all think we're better than we really are, maybe, I don't want to say I wasn't a humble individual, but I definitely was confident, overly confident. So the thing that I took away from that gig is I definitely grew up, musically speaking. I became a better player. I also became, I think, a better human being. I was there a long time.
Yeah.
9 years. So
That's
you're talking about a
time.
really long span. And there were things that I was constantly concentrating on, working on improving things. I would record myself on a regular nightly basis and review the show CDs. Actually, they were show cassettes, and then they became show CDs.
Yeah.
Actually, no, they were always show CDs. What am I talking about? And that was just because I really wanted to make the most of every situation and continue to better myself. So I learned a lot. I think playing that gig live made me a better session player. It gave me a lot more confidence.
Nice. That's a good takeaway. Yeah. And a lot can happen in a person's life between 32 and 41. That's a nice span in life where you probably went through a lot of personal changes and growth during that time.
Yeah, very, very much so. Very much so.
We changed biologically during that time as well.
Without a doubt, and that gig, obviously, that was my very first big touring gig. I had done some gigs prior to that with artists that might have not been as popular, but I went, in the course of a week from, not really working with anybody overly notable unless you're in the music business to like a superstar. So it was definitely a change of pace to say the least. And, having the opportunity to play in front of really large crowds.
Yeah.
It definitely changes the way you play and gives you a different sense of confidence,
Yeah, absolutely. How about Oakridge Boys? What's your biggest takeaway from working with them, other than the fact that they're all really big potheads? Just kidding.
Well, you know, back in the day, they certainly were. You know what? I guess one of the biggest things that I took away from them was seeing 4 older gentlemen that are incredibly resilient, that are still doing it, still banging out 150 dates a year.
Yeah.
When I joined them, I think it was in 2014. They did 167 shows that year. I did 165.
Wow.
So that was incredible. And I definitely had a new appreciation for that era of country music.
Yeah.
You know, prior to that, just prior to working with the Oakridge Boys, I was working with a classic country artist named Connie Smith. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, I was working with Winona for a few months while her husband, drummer, recovered from some injuries that he sustained in a motorcycle wreck. So I went from Winona to Connie Smith, and the Connie Smith opportunity was really unique in that I had never played a proper country, a classic country gig, like a real traditional country gig. I had a little bit, but in playing with her and playing with her band, these guys really knew how to play traditional country music. So I took the opportunity as really almost like going to school. Yeah. And we did the majority of our work were gigs on the Grand Ole Opry. So wow. I was around for almost a whole year, really around guys that just, I mean, they knew the genre. Yeah. And so many people, including myself, when I was younger, just sort of, I didn't have a great deal of, I don't know, it didn't appeal to me, traditional country music, because of the simplicity of it. Mm-hmm. But in the time that I spent, I realized the different feels in the touch, in the placement of the beat. You know, Connie is married to Marty Stewart, and I spent some time with Marty, and Marty really opened me up to listening to some different kinds of music, to expand my ability to be able to play traditional country music better. You know, there's a lot more to it than I think people realize or give credit to. Yeah. So from that gig, from the Connie Smith gig, I got the Oakridge Boys gig. And so clumped in together between Connie Smith and the Oakridge Boys, the takeaway was definitely a different respect for that kind of music and that kind of playing. That's neat. Yeah. Simplistic. It just really wrapping the drums around the lyrics, really sitting in the place where, the phrasing is just perfect for whoever is singing.
Right, and the dynamics play such a huge role too in that more rooted, original styles of the genre.
In the touch and everything. Yes.
Yeah. How neat, and how
so that was cool.
That's cool, and how exciting it must have been. Thanks for joining us, by the way, everybody. I'm seeing a lot of people here. Eddie N, Ralph, Jimmy B, Dishland, Dilly, Bandara. That was a mouthful. Mark Gowith from Switcher Studios on board with us. Mike St. John from Drumlight.net. Bill McFadden from No Nuts Drum Sleeves. Danny Madison, Chuck Cervente, Lawrence, Renato, Mark Collins. Thanks, everybody. Let us know if you have questions. It must have been really exciting playing with yet another legendary classic artist in Boz Scaggs. What was your biggest takeaway working with Boz? That was a couple of years you spent with him, right? About 2 years?
Yeah. Just I did 2017.
Okay.
That was the most musically gratifying gig I've ever had, but also the most musically challenging.
Really?
He was a stickler.
Yeah.
He was very, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, because I have nothing but the utmost respect for him, and I learned a lot working with him. But he was very difficult to please. And thinking back to the musicians that have gone through that camp, he's had the best of the best. You know, after Carlos Vega and Jeff Porcaro, any drummer after that's slumming.
Yeah.
You know, he basically had Toto as his band at one time. But the thing about Boz was anytime that he, generally speaking, had an issue, if that issue could be resolved, I learned something from it. And I'll give you a great example. This is kind of a cool thing to think about, and it's not really a long-winded story, but
that's okay.
So, the song "Lowdown" has an overdubbed 16th note hi-hat track. Okay, if people out there don't know that, but when Jeff Porcaro originally tracked that song, he played 8 notes on the hi-hat. So the regular groove, boom, boom, that's 8 notes. Then he overdubbed the 16th note hi-hat track. Okay, so what you hear on the recording on Silk Degrees is it sounds like it's just 16th notes, which it is. That's an overdubbed hi-hat part. So there's 2 hi-hat parts.
Wow.
Which is very interesting.
Yeah, I never knew that.
So to be able to play that and give it the feel that it needs live, I would play 16th notes on the hi-hat. Okay? And when I first got the gig, there were several times that Boz would ask me just to play by myself. And then he'd have the band play. And then he would thin out the instruments. And he was listening to something in the groove. And he walked over to me one day when I was playing it, and he said, "You're spiking the snare drum." Because I was playing 16th notes, and I was coming down from my hi-hat with my right hand hitting the snare drum, the backbeat. Okay. Yeah. And what he meant by that was the snare drum was popping up dynamically above the other instruments, above the hi-hat, above the kick drum. Mm-hmm. So it was spiking. So he was saying there was kind of it was doing something to the groove. And thinking back to how Jeff played it, he didn't use his right hand. He wasn't coming down with the velocity of from his hi-hat and hitting the snare drum. Right. He was using his left hand, and like he played, his hand was really close to the snare drum, and he was hitting cross stick. So dynamically, the importance of how we play the hi-hat, the snare drum, and the bass drum together, so crucial.
And how it changes the feel of the groove. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And, yes, and that was one of the things where, the light bulb went off in my head, and I thought, I could learn a lot from this guy if I just, keep my mouth shut and pay attention.
Yeah.
But his point was very valid, and that was the truth. I was coming down a little harder than I needed to.
Right.
And it was doing something a little bit to the groove.
Yeah, that's so interesting when you compare what you were doing live to replicate something that was recorded in a completely different way. And what you were doing was just a physically natural way to do it, but it wasn't what was being done on the recording. It's really interesting.
Yeah, so there were that was dynamics was another thing that I learned on that gig that was really important. We played. He was a big stickler on volume, so that was a challenge. It was a big challenge, because I know, and everybody that knows, that when Jeff Porcaro played those parts in the studio, he was not worried about volume. He was laying into that stuff. God bless him. Good for him. So sometimes that could be a challenge to be able to give that conviction to the groove when you have to really be concerned about the volume. So that was a big challenge. The other thing that was huge was drum sounds. Everything had to be the 70s Silk Degrees drum sound. That was his thing. So I had to learn how to adapt what I thought my drums should sound like. And I had to totally change drum heads, and all to serve the songs and his music. And that's, that happens when you're a sideman. You have to be able to do that. but he was very particular about that.
May I ask what heads you used to adapt that sound and adopt that sound, really?
So if you consider what my drums sounded like on my record, very open, very live, very organic. Well, that was not that. I mean, that's how I've always loved my drums to sound.
Yeah, me too.
So what I had to do was I was using Evans. I use Evans drum heads. I was using I think the UV1 coated on the top and the G1 clears, and then sometimes I would use the G1 coateds and the G1 clears, tops and bottoms. Well, I had to go to like what they call an EC2. It's almost like a pinstripe.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and I used EC resonance for the bottom to control the overtone, and then I had to use EC2s on top to really deaden the drums, so there wasn't a lot of sustain. And then I had to use a bunch of moon gel, and at times I had to really tape up the snare drum to give it that dead sound. And I had to experiment with a lot of different snare drums. I ended up using the most successful snare drum that I did come to find that he liked the best was a 6.5 by 14 Gretsch bell brass with a reverse dot on the batter side, and then a little bit of duct tape or moon gel. But it was all about that thuddy 70s sound.
Yeah, and was there? Oh, that's cool. Was there somewhat of a learning curve in your playing to now physically adapt to how those drums felt and sounded and responded, the stick response changing? Because obviously you probably couldn't play exactly the same way as with the other heads, right?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely took a little bit of it was a little bit of an adjustment, but it was more of a matter of making sure he was happy.
Yeah,
because that old saying is, "Mama's happy, everybody's happy."
Yeah,
the boss is happy, everybody was happy. Yeah.
Did it at first? Did it drive you nuts at first, or did you embrace it and say, "Whoa, this is neat. We're in a time machine, and I can hear it"?
It was a little, I don't want to say frustrating, but it was challenging,
Yeah.
But like I said, I had just said, but it worked. It was really appropriate for the music, at least for his music.
That's great.
So it was.
I think it's also a testament to your playing, Dave, because it means that he wanted you for your playing, not the sound, because he had you change the sound and adapt to the sound he wanted. But it was your playing that he, I think, really, appreciated you for, And on top, I mean, you're not an easy guy to work with, so there's that.
Yeah.
So I think that's really neat. And how about Mr. Derringer? What's been the biggest takeaway working with Rick?
I think that the biggest thing with him is I can still play with finesse, and it's good to know that he doesn't equate energy with volume. Although he plays really loud, I think that he appreciates the way I play, because I don't play like the drummers that he's had in the past. I'm not I'm not a basher, and I think that his music can be appropriately approached without having to bash.
Yeah, it's like he's taken his music and adapted it to today's, like, what's going on now, kind of, right?
Yeah, and the players that he has now are really versatile. They're all Nashville guys. I was fortunate enough to he trusted me enough to call on some guys that I knew that were going to be great for the gig. A great friend of mine and a great bass player named Steve Forrest is in his band. Really great background, great overall player. and then a keyboard player named Tim McDonald, they're both phenomenal.
That's great.
They're not just rockers. They're just really well-rounded players. So he has a group of guys that he can be comfortable enough. He could go anywhere, musically speaking.
Yeah.
We could play jazz. We can play funk.
Wow. That's cool.
So that gives him a good foundation and a good, a good bit of confidence.
Yeah. Good. So, I always also like to ask, what have you got going on? But I know that unfortunately right now, and this is, folks, being recorded, broadcast live and archived on March 25th, 2020, when we're worldwide in the middle of dealing with the coronavirus and everything. And I really hope everybody's doing the right thing and taking it seriously and staying away from each other. But I know you can't get out and do gigs. You can't get out and do clinics. Are you doing any online stuff, any online teaching or anything like that people can hook up with you on? And also, please let them know where to get this gem, because this is drummers and other musicians and music fans. You've got to get this.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. Yes, because of the current state, I am accepting lessons via Skype or however, via Zoom. If anybody would want to do that, they can reach out to me at davidnorthrup.com, or they can email me at dsnorthrup@aol.com. You can buy my CD, download it on iTunes. You can also download it on CD Baby, or you can buy it direct through me on my website, davidnorthrup.com, or you can reach out to me on any of the social media outlets, on Facebook, and you can reach out to me on Instagram, and just buy it direct from me that way. It's only $10. That's
that's great.
Song. That's a deal.
It is a deal, especially considering what great music it is. I really enjoy it.
Such a bargain, Dan.
It is.
It's a bargain.
Total bargain. And my wife loved it too. My wife is into so much. Our musical tastes cross over a bit. Her favorite rock band is Rush, and she appreciates, Genesis and Zeppelin, but her heart is in jazz. She's got a very extensive jazz CD collection going back to the original bebop years. She's into soul. She's into funk. So when I put it on, I had a feeling she'd like it, and we listened to it on a trip to Yuma 3 weeks ago, and she just loved it. So, and she says hi, by the way.
That's great. That's cool. Well, tell her I said hello too.
I will.
She's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dave, anytime you want to come on and talk drumming, talk music, update everybody with what's going on, just let me know. This is it doesn't have to be every 4 years.
Yeah, well, that's great. That's great. And I'll stay in touch. And I had a bunch of drum clinics, unfortunately, canceled, and because of our current state. And I was using those to promote the CD. So hopefully, once this all comes to pass, I'll be able to get back out on the clinic trail and do some promoting. And I had sent something out. I posted something on Facebook. There's always a limitation. Obviously, the people that go to my site are friends with me, and they've seen that I've listed this before. But I said something, during this time of quarantine, perfect time to listen to the record. So, download it or buy it.
Yeah.
But, it is. Now that we have all day to do it, or nothing to do and all day to do it, and good time to catch up on some listening. Yeah.
Cool.
But I appreciate you playing it for sure.
Oh, thank you. I really enjoy it. I really do. Hang on the line after we say goodbye to the audience. Folks, thank you so much for joining us. John Kinston, thank you. Timothy Denner, Ted Williams, everybody, thanks so much for joining. I don't know if I can pronounce this one name, but I'm going to try. It's, I'm getting there. Hold on, folks. It's Omaniyi John Ephraim Alawatalababa. That's close. I might have been off by a syllable or two. But, thanks everybody so much for joining. I put Dave's links right there in the comments. go to his website, email him if you're interested in lessons. And thanks for following what we do here on Drum Talk TV. Tomorrow, if you're watching this live or before tomorrow's over, tomorrow at, where is it? 1 o'clock Pacific time, I've got Dr. Nadia Azar back on to talk about drumming injuries and things like that. And then I've got Richie Honori, 11:30 a.m. Pacific on Saturday, drummer for The Sweet. And then that's the interviews for March, and then we launch into April. Hey, your birthday's in April also. What day?
April 8th.
Ooh, mine's the 2nd. Cool.
Cool. That's a day after Jeff's. Jeff's was the first.
That's
Porcaro's
right.
was the first.
Yeah.
And then when's Gadd's? Gadd was
like the
Steve Gadd was April 2.
10th or something. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Well, happy belated or early birthday to you and to all of them.
And to you as well. And happy birthday to everybody watching, whenever your birthday is. Thanks so much, Dave. Hang on the line. And we'll see you all soon. Thanks.